I cheated on my husband with his boss, but he found out, joined forces with my lover's wife, and publicly exposed me, completely destroying me. My name is Rosa, I am 29 years old, and I have been a clothing designer since I left my job to dedicate myself to my art. I met Miguel when I moved into the apartment next door. He was a kind man, but a bit withdrawn. I was the one who invited him for coffee at my place, and I remember his expression of surprise mixed with nervousness. It was sweet. A few weeks later, we were already dating, and without realizing it, I was already talking about sharing not just the building, but his whole life with me. Life with Miguel was stable and secure. When he was promoted and became a team leader, he invited me to dinner and, in the middle of an awkward toast, he proposed to me. I accepted. The wedding was modest but full of emotion. Our families were present, excited, and hopeful. The promise was to build a home, have children, unite our dreams, and transform them into a comfortable, or at least predictable, future. Miguel wanted everything to be okay, for everything to be solid, and at that moment, I thought I wanted that too. At first, everything seemed to go like a beautiful soap opera script. He was growing in the company, and I was selling my first garments. We shared the table every day, even when we were tired. Miguel told me his plans to finance a house, open a savings account for the future of children who did not even exist, and take end-of-course trips. I smiled and nodded. And maybe I believed him too. But something inside me was starting to bother me with that routine, so perfect like a porcelain doll on a shelf without moving. Miguel has always been obsessed with success. And I am not saying this as a criticism, but as an observation. In less than 2 years, he went from being just the hardworking guy on the team to leading an entire department of the company. Some colleagues admired him, respected him, and even feared him. He worked more hours than anyone I knew, but he seemed to thrive under pressure. Deep down, I felt a mixture of admiration and an unease that was hard to define. As he grew, I felt more and more like a supporting character in our story. It was around this time that Miguel became friends with Raul, the new executive director of the company. Raul was the complete opposite of Miguel, talkative, spontaneous, full of fantastic stories, and with a confidence that sometimes bordered on arrogance. He was handsome, younger than Miguel, and always wore expensive watches and a flashy perfume. Raul was married to Camila, a discreet and elegant woman, heiress of the company's founder. The four of us, Miguel, Raul, Camila, and I, started going out to dinners and corporate events together. And that is when everything started to change. As Miguel rose in the company with effort and dedication, I began to feel more and more invisible. As a freelance designer, my work required creativity and constant reinvention. There were days when I felt like a fraud, especially with Camila, who seemed to live in a world where everything went right. Miguel was still a good husband, but he was absent. Even when he was physically by my side, his mind was on the next report, the next position, the next goal. And I started to look away. The strangest thing is that, even with his busy routine, Miguel insisted on having dinner together. He said it was the most sacred moment of our day, and it really was. It was there, between hasty bites and tired smiles, that he talked about buying a house, about starting to look for a baby, about thinking about our real future. I nodded, but inside I could only think about how claustrophobic it all seemed to me. It was as if I were on a path that was too straight, without curves, without surprises. And I have always been guided by curves. There was a growing distance between us, but neither of us talked about it. Miguel believed he was building the perfect life, and maybe he was, in his own way. I felt like a stranger in our own routine. I started to avoid deep conversations. I said I was tired, that I had to finish a project, that I did not want to think about having children right now. And he, always understanding, would back off, but I could see the silent frustration in his eyes, that glint of disappointment he tried to hide. And that, instead of making me feel guilty, infuriated me even more. And it was in that void, in that growing silence between us, that Raul started to get closer. At first, it was just conversations at dinner, then text messages, small compliments, private jokes, nothing important until it became important. Raul was everything Miguel was no longer: light, unpredictable, present. When I realized it, I no longer looked at Miguel with the same desire as before. And the most tragic thing is that I did not even understand it. Or maybe he did notice and just did not want to admit it. The first time I stayed with Raul was in a cheap hotel, far from the neighborhoods where our faces were familiar. I did not hesitate at all. There were no moral dilemmas. When he pressed me against the wall of that stuffy room and kissed me as if I were the last woman in the world, I felt something I had not felt in a long time: alive. I felt desired, powerful, free. And as horrible as it is to say, it was liberating. After that day, it was as if a part of me had awakened and did not want to go back to sleep. Miguel had no idea. He would come home late, always exhausted. I, on the other hand, would invent meetings, client fittings, urgent deadlines. He believed everything. I knew he was not stupid, but he trusted me so much that it did not even occur to him to question me. And that only made everything easier and more cruel. Sometimes he would even send me affectionate messages while I was with Raul, and I would reply with fake emojis while the other whispered dirty things in my ear. I started to avoid touching, kissing, and any intimate gesture with Miguel. I told him I was tired, stressed, and full of worries. He accepted it, although he started to look at me differently. Those eyes that once saw me as a miracle now watched me with caution. But he said nothing. He never confronted me. It was as if he was afraid of the answer he might hear. And I used that silence to my advantage. I hid in it. I got comfortable. Until one day, after another meeting with Raul, we left the building where I pretended to work late. As always, I said goodbye with a quick kiss, without even looking back. I got into his car and we left, laughing. The next day, Miguel was strange, quiet, too attentive, but still kind. That gave me chills. And, for the first time, I felt fear. Fear that he would find out, fear of what was to come. Still, I went on. I thought it was just my paranoia. Maybe I was tired of the same routine. I did not know, and honestly, I did not want to know. I was too deep in this game, and getting out would mean facing the consequences. And I had never been good at that. I had always preferred to run away rather than face it. It had been like that my whole life, and now, more than ever, I wanted to pretend that everything was normal. What I did not know, and only found out much later, is that night, Miguel followed me. He saw everything. He saw me kissing Raul. He saw me get into his car. He saw me smile. He saw me cheating on him without hesitation. And still, he came home, pretended not to know anything, and went to bed next to me as if nothing had happened. That was the moment when the story really changed. But I still had no idea. The following days passed with a strange calm. Miguel asked no questions, did not change his habits, did not treat me differently. And that was precisely what started to make me paranoid. A betrayed man reacts in some way. He fights, he cries, he confronts. But he remained the same loving husband. He cooked dinner, sent me affectionate messages, even made plans for the weekend. And I began to feel that something was not right. My guilt, previously stifled by desire and adrenaline, began to boil inside me. Not out of real remorse, but out of fear. His silence was deafening. I began to notice small gestures, gazes that were too long, vague comments that seemed like hints, a presence that was too constant when I went out. It was as if he had become a shadow that knew everything. And I was being haunted without realizing it. It no longer made sense to make excuses. Even when I told him I had a meeting, that I would be late, he would simply reply, "Okay, honey," with a kind smile and a lost look. That was much worse than a fight. It was a silent cold war, where I did not know how much he knew, but I sensed the end was near. And still, I stayed with Raul, because when you throw yourself into the abyss, the fall seems too inevitable to try to get up. At that time, I still believed I could control the narrative that Miguel perhaps suspected, but did not know enough that in the worst-case scenario, I could play the victim, cry, apologize, and promise to change. I have always been good at manipulating emotions, even my own. But Miguel was different. He did not seem hurt, he seemed patient. And that calmness of his was terrifying. What I discovered much later is that, while I thought I was living my affair discreetly, Miguel was already in contact with Camila, Raul's wife, a woman with the coldness of a scalpel and the contained rage of a time bomb. He did not just want to catch me in the act, he wanted us both to pay, Raul and I, and he wanted to do it in the slowest, most calculated, and most painful way possible. And honestly, he succeeded. But at that moment, I knew nothing. I just thought he was behaving strangely. I fooled myself into thinking I still controlled the situation. I still believed I could change things if they got out of control. What a fool. The truth is, I had not been in control for a long time, and I would only truly understand it when it was too late. Camila always seemed distant to me. She was one of those women who exuded an aura of power, as if she had been molded from birth to command. She was the only daughter of the company's founder, educated abroad, elegant, reserved, and almost incomprehensible. During our dinners as a couple, she always maintained a calm tone, even when Raul made inappropriate jokes or exaggerated his stories. I never really knew what she thought of me. Maybe she thought I was superficial or just another woman without a pedigree in her circle. When Miguel decided to warn her about the case, I did not know immediately. I only found out later, from him, when everything had already fallen apart. According to him, Camila was in shock, not out of sadness, but out of indignation. She kicked him out of the house right away, accusing him of wanting to destroy her husband's reputation. She said it was absurd, that he was crazy. She did not even want to hear the details. Miguel, without reacting, simply asked her to investigate before making a decision. And then he left, taking with him the certainty that the plan would need more time. Camila, however, was not stupid, and unlike me, she did not act on impulse. 2 weeks later, Miguel received a message from her asking him to meet outside the office, in a discreet cafe. She looked visibly exhausted, with dark circles and no makeup. Miguel said she remained silent for several minutes before opening her laptop and showing the report she had received from a private investigator. Raul was not only cheating on me with her, but with at least 5 other women, all married, many of them employees of the same company. She did not cry. She just looked at Miguel and said, "You want to finish them, right?" "Me too." At that moment, Camila stopped being a betrayed wife and became a strategist. She set aside any trace of vulnerability and took control of the situation. She said she already had a plan in mind, but she would need his help. Miguel, who until then had only been thinking about how to separate from me without being destroyed in the process, saw in this an opportunity for poetic justice, or revenge, if you prefer. They united there, in that cafe, as accomplices in something bigger. The agreement was simple: to ruin my image and Raul's in the cruelest way possible, with evidence, with impact, and with an audience. Camila did not want a silent scandal. She wanted Raul's mask to fall in front of everyone. She wanted him to feel the weight of betrayal, exposure, and abandonment. They started meeting once a week, always in public places, taking notes, collecting records. Everything was documented, everything was timed. Meanwhile, I was living in the dark, thinking my world was still under my control. And it is ironic to think about it now, because I still thought I was smart. I still thought I could lie and manipulate everything with the same cynicism as always. Miguel would come home, kiss me on the forehead, and tell me he loved me. I would smile, relieved. I had no idea that at that very moment, my name and roles were turning to dust. And the most terrifying thing is that the idea of exposing everything in public was Camila's. And she, as I would soon discover, did not do things by halves. The meetings between Miguel and Camila were cold, objective, almost corporate. They had a notebook with notes, USB drives with images, the exact times of the meetings between Raul and me. Everything that could be used to destroy us was organized with terrifying precision. While I was getting dressed to go out with Raul, Miguel would note the time he knocked on the door. While Raul was sending me risque messages, Camila was receiving copies of the history from the cloud that I did not even know were synchronized. They knew more about my life than I did. The company's annual event was scheduled for 4 weeks later. It was one of the most anticipated moments of the year. First-class food, unlimited drinks, motivational speeches, award ceremonies, and of course, the presence of the employees' families. Miguel would receive the award for the best performance of the year, and Camila, as a member of the board of directors, would present the trophies. It was the perfect opportunity, an audience full of colleagues, bosses, and our families. The humiliation would be total, and both of us would be unmasked at the height of the celebration. During that month of preparation, Miguel slept by my side. He looked at me with a smile. He cooked for me. He asked me how my day had gone. And every gesture of his was like a sharpening knife. I kept thinking I was fooling everyone. I felt like I was controlling the narrative, while I was just a pawn being moved to the center of the board. Camila, on the other hand, was working hard to keep up appearances. She kept appearing at events with Raul, smiling for the cameras. It was as if she was setting the stage for the massacre. Her goal was clear, to destroy not only our reputation, but also our structures. Miguel did not want me to receive a single cent from the separation. Camila wanted Raul to be fired from the board of directors in disgrace. They were feeding something much bigger than anger. It was revenge, calculated, with a method. It was not screams, it was silent poison. And I was still living in my bubble, so disconnected, so blind, so sure of my manipulation that I never realized that the game had long since ceased to be mine. With each passing week, they were both more certain that the plan would be executed to perfection. They collected security recordings, screenshots, GPS tracking, and even witnesses if they wanted. The weight of the truth was overwhelming, and it was about to fall like a bomb. I kept lying, making excuses, and sending hidden messages. I sensed something was not right, but I had no idea how serious what awaited me was. The most ironic thing of all, when Miguel told me, after all, that the idea of revealing everything on stage during the awards ceremony was Camila's, I did not doubt it. That woman was capable of smiling while burying you alive. And at that moment, she was ready for it. The event hall was impressive. Crystal chandeliers, finely decorated tables, waiters offering glasses of sparkling wine as if it were water. I dressed like never before that night. A tight red dress, new heels, expensive perfume. Raul was elegant but restless. Camila, as always, impeccable. Miguel was smiling, a calm, serene, almost proud smile. I thought it was because of the award he was going to receive. I did not know it was the smile of someone about to pull the trigger. When Miguel was called to the stage, I applauded enthusiastically. I took out my cell phone to film him. He was the personification of the perfect husband. He took the microphone with firmness, thanked his colleagues, the company, and finally looked at me directly. And finally, I thank my wife, Rosa, for having contributed so much to my promotion, even in the arms of my boss. The room froze. The screen behind him lit up and started showing photos. My photos with Raul. Kisses, caresses, hotel checks, everything. There were screams, people standing, cell phones turned off in a hurry. I saw coworkers with their hands over their mouths. I saw my mother crying. I saw Raul turn pale as if the blood had drained from him. And then Camila went on stage, took the microphone from Miguel, and shouted, "You are a worm and you will pay for every woman you used as if she were trash." She pointed to her father, who was present and visibly furious. The old man stood up, ordered the event to end, and told everyone to leave. And so, the room emptied. There were only 5 of us. Me, Raul, Miguel, Camila, and her father. I could barely breathe. I felt my face burning. My legs were failing me. I sat on the floor, barefoot, sweating. Camila's father looked at Raul and said, "You will never set foot in my company again. I will bury you." Miguel did not look at me. Camila stood with her arms crossed. And there, in that sepulchral silence, everything that I was ended. I was erased in front of everyone. I was reduced to nothing. As I was leaving, I tried to grab Miguel's arm. He did not even turn his face. Raul was pushed by his father-in-law. Camila remained motionless, like a statue of ice. And I just wanted to disappear. I wanted to wake up from that nightmare. I wanted to go back in time and not have done any of that. But it was too late. The stage was set and the sentence had been read. Now it was time for the execution. I went home alone. The silence of the apartment seemed to mock me. I sat on the couch and stared at the wall for hours. That same day, I sent a message to Miguel, a huge message. I asked for forgiveness, I begged to talk, I offered anything in exchange for a little dignity. He saw it and did not reply. The next day, I tried again. Nothing. It was as if I had died, only that unlike death, I still felt the shame. And it hurt like a knife. The following days were a blur. I was drowning in sadness, regret, and desperation. My parents came to visit me and cried with me without being able to say anything. I, who once thought I had everything under control, could now barely get out of bed. Until the court notification arrived. Miguel was filing for divorce, and along with him, Camila had also filed for the dissolution of her marriage to Raul. It was the beginning of the end, but not a simple end. It was a public massacre. The lawyers representing Miguel and Camila were personally hired by her father. They were relentless. They came to the hearing with a folder full of evidence: photos, videos, exchanged messages, travel records, hours of calls. It was impossible to argue. I was naked before the truth. Raul, next to me, looked like a cornered animal. When the judge asked us for a statement, I could barely speak. The shame overwhelmed me. And the worst part, my parents were there, witnessing every detail. Miguel remained silent almost the whole time. He just stared at me, as if he wanted to record my fall in his eyes. Camila insisted on reading a letter aloud, detailing the emotional abuse she suffered from Raul and the disgust she felt towards me for being an accomplice. It was then that I understood there would be no compensation. The sentence came quickly. I lost all rights to the assets I had accumulated with Miguel. I was also ordered to pay compensation for moral and emotional damages. Raul lost his job and received a formal declaration of misconduct. The press soon found out. Headlines came out. My friends disappeared. My clients canceled my contracts. They called me a homewrecker, a gold digger, human trash. I became persona non grata. No company wanted to be associated with my name. Camila, although she remained silent, had spread the word in the most influential circles. And Miguel simply moved on, unperturbed, impeccable, as if I had never existed. In a last, pathetic attempt to keep something of what I once had, I sent Miguel another message, a long audio message full of sobs and disjointed sentences. I asked him, at least, not to erase me from his memory. He never replied. I understood. He had already erased me. And now I had to learn to live with the weight of what was left, or with his absence. I could not stay in that city. Everything around me tasted of defeat. Every corner, every bakery, every park, everything reminded me of who I had been, what I had done, and what I had lost. I moved to a small place with a name no one recognized. I rented a room in the back of a simple house. I started sewing for the old ladies in the neighborhood. Nothing like what I had done before. Nothing creative, just mending. Like my life. Miguel took over Raul's position. An ex-colleague told me they received him with enthusiasm, that today he is one of the most admired figures in the company. Strong, direct, focused. He became the man he always dreamed of being. And I was forgotten. Camila also remained in the spotlight. She remains on the board of directors with more power than ever. And yes, they are both still in contact, although a relationship between them has never been mentioned. Maybe out of respect, maybe out of calculation, maybe for nothing. My name became synonymous with shame. I was no longer invited to family birthdays. My parents also moved, after seeing the stares and contempt in the neighborhood. From time to time, my mother calls me, asks me if I am eating well. She does not mention it. My father has not spoken to me since the hearing. My days are now silent. The hours pass slowly. The only company I have is the sound of the old ceiling fan and the memories that torture me. From time to time, I see a photo of Miguel on my colleagues' social media, at events, conferences, formal dinners, with the clothes I helped him choose when he was just an analyst, with a smile that no longer exists for me. Sometimes I surprise myself imagining what it would be like if I had not done what I did. If I had had the courage to speak, to end it, not to cheat. But these assumptions are useless when the sentence has already been served. People believe that the worst pain is the scandal, the public humiliation, the loss. But it is not so. The worst pain is living knowing that you destroyed everything with your own hands, that the consequences were not exaggerated, but exact. Miguel and Camila did not avenge me with anger, they avenged me with justice. And they did it in such a calculated way that they left no escape route. They erased me from their lives and from my own story. Today I live like a shadow. I carry a name that no one wants to pronounce and a face that many want to forget. I betrayed out of vanity, boredom, ego. But the fall I experienced was bigger than I could have imagined, perhaps even bigger than the guilt itself. And if you think it is too dramatic, I understand you. But say it after losing everything. I even lost the right to exist as before. Do you think my punishment was exaggerated?